ash is falling from the sky. Oh wait, that's a different book. But we're still going to talk about some ash with The Age of Ash by Daniel Abraham. Hello, welcome to the Ponderings of Pete. I'm Pete. This is my channel. If you are just arriving newly, fresh off of the browsing, welcome. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate you stopping by. If you like this video, go ahead and like, subscribe, hit that bell because it helps my videos get to you faster. What else? I have a Discord link down below, of course, if you want to join that and talk to me more afterwards. If you are coming back, hello! Thank you for coming back. I appreciate you. Yeah, I think that's it. Let's talk about The Age of Ash by Daniel Abraham. So this is going to be a non-spoiler review. Age of Ash, where to start? Age of Ash, Daniel Abraham, first in a planned trilogy called the Kithamar Trilogy. What's it about? Well, long story short, it's about a city in a fantasy world. There's magic. Real simple. This particular book, we follow mainly two girls, Alice and Samish, who grew up in basically the slums of Kithamar called Long Hill. And we follow their journey through a lot of things. Some of the big themes in this book are grief and loyalty. What grief does to the people around you, how it changes your relationship with the people around you, how grief changes you, and what that does to specifically people that are very loyal to you. Which, honestly, I think he did a good job with this. Elise was definitely a tough main character to sympathize with, at least in the first part of the book. But when I started understanding what was happening to Elise a little bit more, she definitely was a lot more, less unlikable. Because at the beginning, Elise is just not as likable as she could be. I would argue to say that this is a book with an unlikable main protagonist. Take that how you will. Other themes have to do with something that I feel like he's setting up about power, specifically how easy it is to be taken away from you in the snap of a finger. But there's only echoes of that, really, in some of this stuff. This is a multi-POV book. Not just our two main characters get POVs, so it does jump around a bit, and there's a reason for that. So let's get on to why Daniel Abraham is writing this series. It's useful to know this going into things simply because more things will make sense in the book. For instance, we have POVs of several characters that feel like a distinctly unfinished story, and there's a reason for that. We have one or two POV chapters for some characters where they're designed to show you more about the city and the world that he's building. And then we also have, those weird story POVs where you're like, this is a story, but I'm not sure what's going on here. It was unfinished because Daniel Abraham is telling 3 different stories, or more, depending how you look at it, over this trilogy. And all of these 3 books will take place over the same time period. They both take place over the same year in which some crazy stuff happens to the city that we hear about. But we don't hear about why. We don't hear about the stories about why. We only see a little piece. And now why is he doing this? This is a weird idea. This is a different idea. I was watching an interview the other night with him, and he was talking about how epic fantasy is typically considered to be epic in scope. So you have lots of countries and lots of cities and lots of civilizations and lots of characters. But he wanted to write something that was epic in depth, that was focused, and thus the Kithamar trilogy was born. There may be mentions of far-off lands, but I wouldn't expect to see a lot of them, simply because this series is about this city. Much like if you've ever read Senlin Ascends, I've only read the first book personally, or you've read The Night Circus by Aaron Morgenstern. Both of those books have objects. The Senlin Ascends has the Tower of Babel. The Night Circus has the circus itself. And both of those things take on a personality of their own because of how vibrant they are. Whether you have the different levels of the tower or just the general structure of how the hierarchy of the tower works. Like, it feels like they take a step back from the characters that populate them, and they are their own character. The Kithamar series is doing something similar to this, where it's very atmospheric. It's very telling you about the city, and it's great because the city's split up into different parks, and here we hear about the slums, and I think next we'll probably hear about something along the merchant sides of town, and then We explore some of the very rich side of town, which is Green Hill. No Sonic there. We also follow some events following a certain brotherhood that's basically a cult that holds power in the city. So there's a lot of elements going on in this book, and I really, really liked it. It's definitely one of those books that you have to know what you're going into, and you have to understand that these different POVs where the stories aren't complete, you're going to get those completed stories eventually. And I definitely trusted in Abraham to do this because he's had other books, such as The Shadow in Summer, which is the first book of the Long Price Quartet, where, it was a great book to start off with. But as you progress through this series, more context was given to the events that happened in Shadow in Summer, and the effects of the events that happened in Shadow in Summer were seen in a new light, and you saw what they did to people. And because of this, that made the events of the Shadow in Summer so much more full, so much more, it turned it into an amazing book. Because when you go back and read A Shadow in Summer, everything's taken on a new meaning. It's not necessarily like, I don't know if I would describe it as reading in a new book, but like, it's pretty close to it. And I haven't read, because he hasn't published the other two yet, but I highly suspect that Kithamar, the Age of Ash, is going to be exactly like that. Not exactly like that. I would say it's actually going to be more like that. We're actually going to see all the pieces on the board, and you're going to be like, oh, we get this piece here, but this, and this is also happening. And so it's going to have a lot of high reread potential for this series because of that. What else? What else can you expect from this story? I'm actually going to tackle what you can't expect. So if you've read anything by Abraham before, specifically his solo work, whether it's the Dragon's Path, the Dagger and Coin series, or the Long Price Quartet with like A Shadow in Summer, etc., you have an idea of what you could expect. It's not going to be your typical fantasy. It's going to be a lot more character focused. There's not a whole lot of action. There's definitely some action scenes, but there's not a crazy amount of action. Probably more than A Shadow in Summer, I would say. But again, not a crazy amount. I would also not expect The Expanse. So The Expanse is different. A lot different. One, because it's sci-fi, of course. But two, because he is a co-author. There is a lot more action in The Expanse. If you go in and say, I like a lot of the character work in The Expanse, then you're probably going to like Age of Ash. Daniel Abraham's character work does shine in The Expanse, but in his solo work, it shines so much brighter. And it's really cool. I love it. The other thing I would say is one of the descriptors of this book is a thief story, because Alice and Simish are thieves. Don't expect Ocean's 11 or Lies of Locke and Lamora, because this is not that. I would say that when comparing it to Lies of Locke and Lamora, I see the parallels, because Lies of Locke and Lamora is very vibe heavy in terms of atmosphere of the city, and it describes and characterizes the city well as well. The Age of Ash is less campy than Lies of Locke Lamora is, because Lies of Locke Lamora goes into the whole like crazy bondsmiths and not bondsmiths, bond mages. There are similarities, and the humor and the action of Lies of Locke Lamora are not in this. The characters are wonderful. It's not Lies of Locke Lamora. I can't think of anything else I would like to say about this other than you definitely should read it. I would definitely recommend you read Long Price Quartet first, because that is a series, and it is a series that you can learn to trust Abraham as an author on, just simply because you learn how his books grow over an entire series, because Abraham is one of those authors that his series are definitely better together than apart. The whole series is greater than a sum of its parts. So yeah, that's all I have. Abraham's awesome. Go read Age of Ash. If you have read Age of Ash, let me know what you thought about it, because I always love to hear that. And if you've got this far, you're awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great night and get some rest.